There are 3 rules when it comes to mogwais. 1. Keep them out of bright lights. 2. Keep them away from water. 3. Don't feed them after midnight.
You guys are really hungry.
Remember the rules, but if you didn't listen, might as well make it a feast by making some of their favorites from their very own cookbook. Let's party on with the Gremlins. Gremlins, the official cookbook with recipes by Jen Fujikawa and written by Eric Burnham, brings us 50 recipes inspired by these crazy little green creatures in the 1984 Christmas classic Gremlins and its sequel, Gremlins 2: The New Batch. I just rewatched these 2 movies and I'm astounded by the amount of puppetry and practical effects these films had. Pretty refreshing to see, especially now when movies are so over-reliant on CG. And by the way, Gremlins 2, one of the best sequels of all time. This cookbook is presented like a family cookbook of the Peltzers featuring their favorite family recipes, but then it's also made to look super beat up as if it got roughed up and caught up in all of the chaos caused by the Gremlins. So expect to see old school 80s inspired American classics, but mixed in with all that are some more questionable, crazy recipes like gremlin guts and hatching cocoons. I really like how the cookbook visually communicates these contrasting themes. You see a lot of 80s style imagery with the backgrounds and fonts. Even the photos use dinnerware and appliances that scream 80s. And in the midst of all that, you see all of these scratches and burns, stains to indicate the mess and chaos of the Gremlins. You can also find a lot of techie props in the photos to capture the science lab themes from the second movie. The nostalgic themes aren't just on display with the visuals, but extends to the writing as well. The intro text for the recipes are told from the perspective of Billy and his parents and often trigger a memory for the movie. Most of the time I'm reading it, I'm like, yeah, I remember that scene. For a family cookbook though, there's not a lot of photos of their family, but instead there's a ton of photos of the Gremlins and their many different kooky iterations, which is great, because after all, the Gremlins are the real star of the show. There are also some helpful pages at the end of the cookbook, like a dietary consideration chart, some deep frying safety tips, as well as one of the most detailed and comprehensive metric conversion charts I've seen in a cookbook. But my favorite part is this cute little note about mogwai safety tips, which is a callback to the 3 important gremlin rules mentioned in the movies. I thought that was really cute. But these rules aren't gonna stop me from indulging in these gremlin-inspired family recipes as I make 3 dishes from the Gremlins cookbook. Hope it's not midnight yet. If you've ever watched the hit show Microwave with Marge, you might have seen an episode where a kooky-eyed gremlin pops out of a giant vat of cheesy noodles. Unfortunately, Marge didn't get to finish that dish, but that's where we come in. Let's finish what she started as we make this tuna noodle cheese product chowder surprise. First things first, we're going to cook about 8 ounces of egg noodles in a pot of boiling water for about 8 to 9 minutes until al dente. Then drain them and set them aside, but don't rinse them. Then heat that same pot to medium heat and melt a tablespoon of butter. Then add in half a cup of diced onion, a diced celery rib, and 2 minced garlic cloves. Fry these up for 4 to 5 minutes until soft, and add 8 ounces of sliced white mushrooms and continue to cook for another 3 to 4 minutes. Then remove everything and set them aside. Next, we raise the heat to medium-high, then add in another 2 tablespoons of butter, then whisk in a quarter cup of all-purpose flour and cook for 2 to 3 minutes before adding in a cup of whole milk and a cup of heavy whipping cream. Keep cooking for 4 to 5 minutes to thicken it and stir in a teaspoon of dried thyme, half a teaspoon of onion powder, half a teaspoon of kosher salt, a quarter teaspoon of nutmeg, and a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. Turn off the heat, then stir back in the noodles, the mushroom mixture, 2 5-ounce cans of tuna that have been drained, and a 3/4 cup of frozen peas. Then transfer everything to a grease baking dish and bake this in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. Now you may have noticed that I did not add the tuna in the footage. That's because I forgot. I only remembered after baking it, so I ended up adding it later and remixing everything in the dish and popping it back in the oven. Whoops. Now to add the toppings, stir together a 1/3 cup of panko breadcrumbs with 3 tablespoons of melted and unsalted butter. Spread that evenly on top of the casserole and sprinkle on some shredded cheese. Bake for another 5 minutes until golden brown for a warm serving of tuna noodle cheese product chowder surprise. Now we can't make Gremlins food without making the dish that started it all. That big pile of cold, uncovered fried chicken that Billy pulled out of his fridge to feed the mogwais after midnight. We're making our own batch of midnight fried chicken. First, we make the buttermilk marinade in a sealable container by combining together 2 cups of buttermilk, 2 eggs, a quarter cup of pickle juice, a tablespoon of hot sauce, and a teaspoon of kosher salt. Submerge in that marinade 4 pounds of chicken pieces, cover, and refrigerate for 4 hours. While we wait on that, let's make the dredge in a sealable bag by combining a cup of all-purpose flour, a half cup of cornstarch, a tablespoon of confectioner's sugar, a tablespoon of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of onion powder, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, 2 teaspoons of garlic salt, a teaspoon of white pepper, and half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Once the chicken is marinated for 4 hours, transfer the pieces to the flour mixture to dredge the chicken. Now we're gonna get ready to fry by heating up 4 cups of vegetable oil in a Dutch oven over medium-high heat until it reaches 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Fry the chicken in batches for 10 to 12 minutes each side until golden brown and reaches an internal temp of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. I was kind of having a hard time controlling the heat, and my first few chicken pieces were a bit on the burnt side, but eventually I got the feel for it. When done frying, remove from the oil and drain on a wire rack. Now we have our own mountain of fried chicken to dig into. Just make sure you eat them before midnight. And finally, since it's the holiday season, let's keep things festive by whipping up a batch of Sheriff Frank's favorite beverage. We're making Sheriff Frank's Eggnog. But heads up, the cookbook's version doesn't have the special ingredient that Sheriff Frank adds in the movie. For this, we're heating up a large saucepan over medium-high heat and add in 2 cups of whole milk. Then we're adding to that some spices, a stick of cinnamon, 1 star anise, and a tablespoon of whole cloves. Let it all simmer, then remove from the heat and set aside. Now in a large bowl, we're going to combine together 5 egg yolks, a cup of granulated sugar, and 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Now let's temper the eggs by adding in the hot milk 1 ladle at a time until fully combined. Transfer everything back to the saucepan and let it simmer on medium-low and continue to whisk for another 2 to 3 minutes until it gets thicker. Strain the eggnog to get rid of the spices, then stir in 1.5 cups of half and half, then let your eggnog sit in the fridge overnight. Once you're ready to drink some, top it up with some whipped cream and sprinkle some sugar and cinnamon on top for a festive glass of Sheriff Frank's Eggnog, booze optional. What time is it? It's chow time. Let's dig into this tuna noodle cheese product, Chowder Surprise. Not a bad start. I like the noodle to tuna ratio, good amount of creaminess from the roux, and I like the peas and mushrooms mixed in. The topping was pretty good, but the noodles are where it's at. Super simple and easy to make, and I think this recipe is a good base to be customized to your own liking. Maybe add some hot sauce or crumbled sausages, maybe some chicken and broccoli. What about shrimp and Old Bay seasoning? It's a pretty foolproof recipe, and it could be pretty fun to play around with the flavors. Okay, let's have us some fried chicken. This mountain of greasy crispiness looks glorious. Yep, this fried chicken ain't bad. Got a nice crisp on the skin, and both the drumsticks and the thighs are well cooked inside and juicy. But me, I'm a drumstick kind of guy. I especially like gnawing on the cartilagey bits by the handle. In terms of the flavor and seasoning, it was surprisingly light. I was expecting more flavor from the marinade and the dredge because of the amount and the variety of seasoning used in it. I think if I was to remake this, I would probably double the amount of pickle juice, hot sauce, and seasonings. This also reheats very well in the air fryer, and eventually ate all of this during the week. While we're indulging, might as well wash it all down with some rich eggnog, and let me tell you, this is one of the best, if not the best eggnog I've ever had. The warm spiciness from the seasonings hit you right away, and you get hit with the cinnamon, star anise, and cloves, which is actually really delightful. The consistency is perfect, creamy but not too thick. The whipped cream topping is nice to look at, but not necessary. But the one thing I would change is the sweetness. It's a bit too sweet, so I ended up having to dilute it with a bit more milk during the week. And next time I would just have the sugar. So is the Gremlins Cookbook any good? I really appreciate the old school feel of this cookbook's design and recipes. I also think it does a pretty good job of thematically capturing the silliness and wackiness of the Gremlins movies. The food was pretty decent too, so it's got my thumbs up.